John Davenport, and myself here. Please stand, and Sean will lead us in the pledge of allegiance. So we will begin with discussing the revised building reconfiguration. So I will turn the meeting over to John.
Okay, there's nothing really to report with respect to this. This is the same memo that you've seen before, so I think we can move on to the next section.
So we will go over the feedback from our last meeting when we met with some of the CPAC members, PTOs, and school council, and additional parents. Does anyone have any commentary?
It seems the parents were leaning more towards, it seems like, 7, 8, 9, and 10 were the favorites with all the groups so far. But it seemed like the parents were leaning for 5 and 6. But once we discussed it and they thought about it and figured it out, I think they all moved back over to 7, 8, 9, and 10. It's still, you have some parents that are like, let's keep all the grades together, so all the resources together. And there's a large contingency of parents who are like, listen, I have 4 kids in the district, I got to go to 4 different schools to pick them up. It would be great if I only had to go to one school to pick them up. So I understand it from that point of view.
Nope.
We will continue. We will move on to the discussion of that surrounding the regional agreement.
Okay, and I believe we have someone from DESI who's going to be joining us. So while she's logging in, I'll just say that we were able to connect with Christine Lynch, who is hoping to attend this telephonically and advise us about the process for revising the agreement.
Can I ask a question about these microphones? I hear sound coming out here, which is good, but I would like to turn it up, and I'm using the things on the side, nothing seems to happen. Is there a way to turn the volume up? No, to hear other people. Like when John's speaking, I couldn't really hear because of the rain feedback. There's things on the side. There's things on the side, but I don't know if that. Can someone give me a 1, 2, 1, 2?
Check. I don't know if those are volume controls.
All right, we'll just have to speak clearly and speak loudly, I guess.
Okay.
Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I'll move next to my buddy John over there.
There's a touch screen.
Yeah, but it doesn't have volume.
Sean, if you sit right where Aaron is, then that way the sound kind of closes rather than us being in a line, and you can see us. It just tends to work a little bit better. I know the sound is tough on the line right now.
So maybe while we're waiting for Christine, I'll just say that I had asked her to advise us on the process because it has been a number of years since this agreement was revised. The last substantial agreement, I believe, was 30 years ago. And my prior experiences were all in municipal districts, so I don't really have a great deal of experience with this either. So I asked her if she could just basically tell us how it's done and advise us on the timeline to try to help us meet our goal. And I think Christine is there.
Christine, if you can hear us, could you wave, please? Christine, if you can hear us, could you please wave?
I think we've got this before. You're using the microphone. You do this.
Christine, can you hear us? All right, great.
Thank you. I had a little trouble for a bit there.
No worries.
So Christine, can you still hear us? I'm just gonna go over there. and see what I can say.
Christine, can you give us a 1-2 or a thumbs up if you can hear us? She cannot.
I'm not sure. Hi Christine, let's speak right to the computer. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
All right.
Thank you.
I will be the relay person. I'm John Pavlovsky from the group.
Good to meet you.
As I told the planning committee, I have asked you to sort of advise on the process in general and lay out what a timeline might look like. If you are hoping to be able to make some changes, obviously not for this fall, but possibly the fall of the following year.
Oh, okay. Okay, that's good to know.
So, looking at where we are, I've shared some information about the district with you. What would you say we should be striving for a timeline, and what would be the next steps as we start to involve the communities more, involve the state more in potential changes to the agreement?
Yeah. Well, I think generally it's good to back up from when you might plan to go to town meeting. I mean, I know a lot of districts like to go to discrete town meetings rather than holding a special town meeting. So let's say you're planning to have next year's spring town meeting. So you probably need to back up from there to determine how long it may take. And this is really very difficult to determine how long it takes. If there are no significant local issues, it may take anywhere from 2 to 6 months. But that's dependent on a number of different things. How quickly usually we have iterations of the language of the agreement that goes back to what we talked about in my office and the local officials, the planning committee. To the extent that your community has a lot of interest in particular issues that we might be thinking of changing, you may yourselves need to hold a lot of public outreach sessions, and how long it may take to then resolve the language that you want the commission to put in the agreement is dependent on how quickly you hold these meetings, how difficult it might be to reach some agreement. And then obviously that version would then need to be submitted to the for review. From our perspective, there's 2 people, my office, myself, and one other person. So we do the review of the agreements. We do it also in conjunction with the legal office, so any agreement or amendment that's submitted to the commission's approval would be reviewed by both myself or Michelle Brennan, who I attached to the email that I had sent to you last week, as well as a number of others before it goes to the commission. So, again, depending on what the issues are and how controversial it might be at the local level, that could take, but there are some areas of the agreement that probably would need to be addressed. And some of the areas that we specifically, require of anyone looking to amend the regional agreement would be composition of the school committee, the selection method that you use. And we review it to make sure that in fact the composition of the school committee complies with one person, one vote, which is a Massachusetts state law requirement. It's also a constitutional requirement. And the other major piece of any agreement is the budget assessment process. So we would very specifically look to make sure that in fact those two sections address the requirements of the Chapter 70 HWRSD Bill 1993, and the requirements of the Chapter 7 law, which is very different for regional school districts than it would be for a school district. So there are some very specific, there's very specific language that need to be included in a regional school district agreement. And I know you are very specifically talking about, I believe, the schools, the number of schools that you have in the grade configuration. So that obviously is another area that generates a lot of local concern. From the department's perspective, there's no law or regulation that requires a certain grade configuration or a certain number of schools or one in each town or what the process might be, to change the grade configuration. But that is something that typically generates a lot of discussion and interest at the local level. The only thing we would require that in fact the regional school committee, whatever schools serve the grade levels of students that are in the regional school district, must be under the control of the school committee. So either it's owned by the school committee or leased to the school committee. But beyond that, how many schools you have, what the configuration of grades are, where they're located, that is something that the department you would need to address. But it's not something that there is a law or regulation that requires that it be done a certain way. But it is something from your own perspective that would need to be vetted and agreed to, in order for it to get passed through town meeting votes, you would need to have the language be substantially agreed to by the residents of the member towns. And the other thing is, I guess, in terms of any amendment to a regional school district agreement, you must follow your own agreement procedures. Yours actually is reasonably simple. It requires a majority vote to amend of the school committee, and then of course it requires town vote for both member towns. So it's not a lengthy process. It's unlike other agreements that have a time frame attached to these various stages of approval. It basically just says approval of the school committee and the town meeting. So that's a big enough hurdle, quite honestly, to get the towns to approve, to get the majority of the school committee to approve. But there's not a time frame at least that you need to, concern yourself with at least. But do you have specific questions that I haven't addressed? I know this is probably the first time you've maybe gone through this, and from our perspective, we want to be as helpful to you, certainly, and your committee as we can be.
I'm happy to relay them because I'm sitting next to the computer. Is it okay if I ask a couple of my own first?
Sure.
So a couple of things that came up with during your presentation of that. When you were talking about Springtown meetings, it made me, that one kind of caught me because I saw some information on the DESI website saying that anything that was going to go into effect, at this point we'd be talking for FY25, would have to be approved by the board by December of 24. Is that still true, or is there more flexibility in the timeline?
I think it depends what you're trying to do, but as I understand it, I think we have more flexibility in the timeline. The regulations require or you're adding grade levels to the region, that all approvals need to be in place by December 30th of any given year in order for the effective date to be the following July 1st. So you're not, I don't believe, adding a member, or you're not adding a grade level. So the only other, so that's the requirement, adding a grade a new member or grade levels to existing region. And the primary purpose of that is for Chapter 70, because our school finance office needs advance notice to switch to Chapter 70. So in fact, if you were adding grades, you were a high school region, you were adding elementary, we want to have the money appropriately go to the high school region, as opposed to having it in elementary. So they need at least 6 months notice just to get the budgets in place. The only other thing is just that if you in fact might be amending your assessment methodology, and this is not a requirement, this is just a suggestion, is that you want to be careful in terms of, let's say you go to spring town meeting, and you're changing your assessment methodology to create a new way of creating assessments. And at the same time, you're going to get your budget and assessments approved for the following fiscal year. That can be very confusing. Which assessment method are you using? Using the old one? Using the new one? So in those circumstances, we either suggest one or two things. Do it in advance. Change the agreement in advance, so it's 100% clear what method you're using in terms of creating the following fiscal year's budget. Or make the language very, very specific in your Springtown vote. Because let's just say you created your assessments on a new methodology, and you're asking the towns at the same meeting to approve that new methodology. If they vote that down, now your budget is automatically voted down. You understand what I mean?
Yep.
You can't use a method unless the towns in fact approve that method. And if you're trying to get it through at the same town meeting, it can be very, very tricky and complicated. So that's not a legal requirement, that's just a caution to say you could be in danger of not having a budget approved. The town meeting, they may like your budget, but if they don't actually approve that method of creating the budget or creating the assessments, then both of them, you have to go back to the drawing board, start again. So, but that's the only timeline I guess I would be concerned about in terms of trying to get the agreement or the language of the agreement approved, let's say by December of any given year for a start date of the following July 1st.
Thank you. Those are great answers, and I appreciate the practicality there as well. The other question that I had was, you said that there are some pieces that would probably be essentially required changes to the agreement because laws have changed or whatever. Would it be possible for you to send to me to share with the committee what are the new components that you see sort of are missing for our agreement that would have to be included in any kind of revision that the state would bless?
I certainly can do that. I mean, I'd point out one caution is, the regional agreements, I mean, there are some certainly parameters in law that certain areas need to be addressed in any given regional school district agreement. But how they're addressed, the planners have fair latitude in terms of how certain things are addressed. So when we do any review, I don't want to, how do I say, take your local process, to stop any creativity at the local level in terms of the kinds of language, you want to include in there. Because you're an operating regional school district, so you want to think about how you operate, look at the language of your regional agreement, see if in fact that's kind of matching. What you should be doing is operating, obviously, in accordance with the language of the agreement. So to the extent that some procedural things or some areas that you feel either should be changed or in fact do not actually, maybe do not fully explain how you currently operate, you should feel free to add your own language to fix that or to update that, you know. And that's something I wouldn't know. I mean, you work there, you know, your volunteers on your committee work, you know, or know your district obviously a lot better than I do, or certainly much better than I do. But to the extent there are, you know, some very specific legal requirements, and as I mentioned, very specifically, they're usually around the budget, the assessment, and again, the one person, one vote. There's some other things too, but those are the big ones, you know, I would say. So, you know, certainly we can look, or I can look at the language of your agreement in those areas very specifically, you know, and potentially, you know, help in terms of providing some advice. You know, I will say, look at your one person, one vote. I think your populations have changed a little bit, you know, so you may need to kind of make some adjustments there. And there are some options in terms of how regional school committee members are selected that may be of help to you. And as I say, I think you probably operate this way anyway. You're probably well aware, obviously, that there's a minimum local contribution that's required of each of your member towns. There's a statutory assessment methodology as well as what we call an agreement or alternative methodology. So those different ways of calculating assessments should be fairly specifically addressed in the regional agreement. And I notice they're not very detailed the way it is currently. So I would suggest just from looking at it very quickly that at least some more detail probably needs to be added in terms of your assessment calculations. It shouldn't be controversial, as I said from the beginning. I don't think that would be a controversial area. I think it would just be to represent in language what you probably already do. You know, so just to include the language in your agreement to represent what how you're currently operating. But I'd be happy to take a look and provide some areas that you might need to look at in order to comply with, you know, the law or the regulation. And again, to the extent you want to add, or your committee wants to add language in certain areas, we can certainly provide you advice. The other part, I guess, of the role is I've been around a long time. I'm actually retired, still working as a consultant. So, but over the years, you have a lot of experience in terms of language that's been included in a regional school district agreement. Oops, gee, that didn't work too well. It's caused a lot of controversy somewhere. It would be better to phrase it differently, or maybe provide some further clarification. So there's some areas where it's not, the law or the regulations do not require certain language. But what we typically try to isolate and say, but you may want to consider some of these things based on our experience in working over the years with other regional school districts. You know, certain language seems to be very useful to include in a regional agreement, even though it's not required, or certain language maybe is best not to include in the regional school district agreement. So, you know, there's some legal things that we have, you know, we need to make sure are addressed. And there's some other things that just from experience that we might be able to provide some support or assistance to, or advice as you begin to yourself look at the language.
Okay, thanks very much. At this point, I think I'll just be the relay person because.
Can you hear me when I'm speaking now? She cannot. Okay. I do have a couple questions. Could you, she was saying about one person, one vote, and that we might have to make some adjustments. Could you just give us a little clarification on what she's talking about?
Sure. First question from Sean Kennedy. Can you provide more detail about the one person, one vote requirement?
Sure. There are 5 different methods methodologies for meeting one person, one vote, and that is in the law, and there's also been various court cases that have addressed this in terms of the regional school districts. But the 5 methods are the appointed method. If school committee members in a regional school district are to be appointed, they need to be appointed by some other group of elected officials. So this typically happens in a situation where there's a high school district, 9 through 12 regional school districts that have feeder elementary districts who have elected school committees at the elementary level. So the elementary elected school committee members can appoint members to serve on the regional school committee. Doesn't really work in your situation, but it is one of the options. The other, and I think this is the one you use, is just elected. You have a certain number of school committee members that you choose, and they are elected. You have, I think, a 2 and 5 split, I think, at this point in time. So, yeah, so 2 of the members are elected by Hampton, I believe, and 5 are elected by Wilbraham. So that is supposed to be representative of the population in each of those 2 different communities, so that in fact there is reasonable equal population. I think the 2 towns are about, I think it's like a 3-to-1 ratio or something of that sort. So reasonably speaking, the representatives, and this is the formula, so I'm just speaking in general terms at the moment. But reasonably speaking, the representation on the school committee should be reasonably like a 3-to-1 ratio. So that's the second method. Third method is weighted voting. So it's very similar in the sense that, again, the number of representatives in the weight of their vote needs to be representative of the population. So again, if you have a 3-to-1 ratio, it would be like, let's say, 6-to-2 ratio, just as an example. The other is district-wide elections, and that would be all of the residents of both of your member towns choose all the members of the school committee. So all 7 members of your school committee would be elected by all of the residents of the member towns voting at a district-wide election. And if all of the representatives happen to come from Hampton, then those are the top vote getters, well, that's how it would work. Or vice versa, or if the top 7 were mixed between Hampton and Wilbraham, but in fact they were not proportionate to the population, it would still be legal in the sense that all of the residents of both member towns had an equal right to vote on who they wanted as their top representatives. The other is district-wide voting with residency requirements. So as an example, you could say 2 members from Hampton, 5 from Wilbraham. Again, district-wide, you have a town meeting, all the residents of both towns have an opportunity to vote on all the members of the school committee. The top 5 vote getters from, the top 5 from Wilbraham would be elected. The top 2 from Hampton will be elected. So I can, by the way, send you some materials on this, because sometimes it's easier to read some materials, to be able to absorb it a little bit better, but I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions that you might have on that.
So when she was saying the 3-to-1 ratio, is she trying to say that if we amend the agreement, we have to have 6 members from Wilbraham and 2 from Hampden? Is that what she's implying? Is that the change we're going to have to make?
So the question again from Sean Kennedy is, so under some of those models that you described, where it was a 3-to-1 ratio, are you saying that the amendment to the agreement will require us to change the composition so that, for example, Wilbraham gets an additional member to create that 3-to-1 ratio?
Well, I think you will need to review it. It does not appear at the moment that I do like to just confirm too the population numbers. I use the federal census. If you have a local census, you can use that. You can use the federal census. You can use the estimated census that the Department of Revenue puts out let's say every 5 years. But you need to use it consistently. So if you use the federal census, that's fine, perfectly fine. If you have local census, fine. But you sort of need to use that consistently. So I did a quick calculation, I think, based on the federal census. And again, I'm roughing this out. I can give you some exact numbers, but I'm basically saying somewhat of a 3-to-1 ratio, in that range.
Can I jump?
So, yeah.
No, go ahead, finish. Go ahead and finish your answer, please. I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish your answer. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Oh, okay. So again, you can use weighted voting, so you have the same 7 members, the same 5-2 split. But the weight of, let's say, Wilbraham's vote might be a little higher in order to make up that differential to reach the 3-to-1 ratio. So you can weight the votes, so you can still have the same number of people. You can also, and this is a discretion of, at the local level, you can have more members on your school committee. I mean, you have 7. That's perfectly fine, but I mean, you could have 9, you could have 8, you could have 5, you could, so it depends on the total number of representatives that you have on your school committee as well. So I'm not suggesting you change the 7. I'm just saying it is dependent. The calculation is based on how many total members you might have. So there's a couple of ways there could be some adjustments to this one person, one vote calculation. One is to make sure we're all on the same page in terms of enrollment. The other is to make sure, in fact, you want to maintain 7 members. The other is, if you wanted to look into the possibility of having something, a method other than just the 5-2 split. You want to have district-wide elections, you want to have weighted voting, and then, potentially to look at those other methods to see, how that would play out in terms of the number of representatives from each of the 2 towns.
Sure. So I wanted to just ask a follow-up on what I think was your last method. I think you said that if the towns wanted to maintain a 5-2 split, and that wasn't exactly proportional to the population of the 2 towns, that would be permissible as long as members of both towns got to vote on everybody. Is that correct?
Yes, but it's a different methodology. So what you would be doing is, again, it's called district-wide, representation. So it would be a different methodology. But if all of the residents in both of the towns, and you wanted district-wide voting with residency requirements, and you still wanted 2 members from Hamden, 5 members, from Wilbraham, you would have a district-wide meeting. All of the voting, residents would go and vote. And again, top 5 vote getters from Hamden, from Wilbraham, and the top 2 from. Now that has to occur at the biennial state election, unless there is a special petition made to the legislature. And by the way, that happens all the time. So let's say you wanted to have that at your normal, I don't know, your spring meetings or something. So you wanted to have the election of your school committee members district-wide with residency requirements held at the same time as your town meeting. You would have to petition the legislature, and they would have to pass a bill that would allow that. And it has happened in many instances in the past. It's not necessarily a difficult piece of legislation to get by. So that absolutely could be done.
Okay, thank you. Sean, did you have another one?
Actually, I have one for the committee before we go back to So, are you guys kind of like, so we're saying that we want to make a change, right? And we want to make one, a change that's going to maybe change the assessment potentially, and the other one is change the town lines that kids can cross to go to school in other towns, right? What she's telling us, I believe, if we make any changes, Desi's like, hey folks, you got to make these changes too, all right? So what I'm thinking is, would it be smart to maybe do the changes, the updates that Desi wants, maybe this fall? This spring. No, this fall, right, this fall. And then in the spring, we can come in with the assessment and then the configurations of town lines. Or put the assessment, put the assessment in the fall with the changes that Desi's requiring us to make for a fall vote. So then when we do the budget the following year, there won't be any confusion, and then we will also be voting on the crossing of the town lines. Do you think it's better to split them in two? Because I believe she also said that, remember, we thought we had a year, and then we were told it's the end of this year, but it seems to me that we can do it at the spring for the 2025 school year. Right?
Didn't I also hear that?
Yeah.
Didn't I also hear that the agreement and language approved should be approved by December for a start date of July 1st?
No, only if it
Vote on it
changes.
in the town?
Yeah, no, I think what she was saying was that they need the 6 months if you're going to add a grade to the agreement, but the agreement covers, I don't think we'd have to add pre-K.
I missed the
Or
entire
adding
beginning of
another,
what she said because of the rain. I couldn't hear anything.
Yeah. Am I correct?
Or town.
You're correct.
Or another town, yeah. So if we don't add a town and we don't add another grade, so if we don't move pre-K into the mix, I guess, but I don't know if pre-K is even, is it covered?
It's not in the agreement now.
Yeah, but is it covered by Desi, like in this? Okay, so we could, whatever, that's something that we could put off to her. But did you see how it's almost like there's two different dips here? Rather than hit everybody with, all right, here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna make these changes and we have to do this and we have this voting and then we have to add these are changes that Desi wants and then here's the assessment and then here's the town lines. Maybe it's best to say housekeeping, one, so they understand that this is just like required, and then maybe the assessment there as well. And then the other one on town lines, we can, have more time to have conversations and really to fine tune it so that we do that in the spring. This just came to me with just based on the stuff that she was talking about now, to make it less confusing, more transparent, more clear, and give us more time. What do you think?
I think from a town point of view and a budget point of view, the more time we can give our finance committees to adjust to all the changes, the better. So if we can get it done by December,
Okay.
in its entirety, I think that would be much more beneficial to the town finance committees. They do so much work as it is.
But isn't it actually November that the fall town meetings are?
October, November, somewhere.
October, November. So that gives us just 2 less months of this year. I'm just saying it's just. I'm up for like putting in the time this summer. I'm up for meeting however we have to meet and doing whatever work that we got to do. But we got to make sure that people who aren't around this summer, who are traveling, vacations, tournaments, whatever they have going on, that when they come back home, they're not going to be like, whoa, what's this?
I think that's just going to be a matter of the superintendent with that survey, the sample survey that you have for us, just getting the word out and sending it. We can do mass mailings, we can put it on both town websites, we can announce it multiple times at town, at select board meetings and
Okay.
school committee meetings. I think if people are in tune to their child's education, they're going to be in tune to some of these meetings. So, and they're all going to talk with one another as well, along with the informational meetings you're going to do in person. I think we're going to hit the target that we need to. I certainly hope we would.
Cool. All right. So we're going to do everything, but we got to do it really clear. We got to be very non-confusing about it. Maybe just present different buckets and say, here's what we're voting on, not just one big piece to vote on. Like, here's the DESI pieces languages that they need to update, and the next would be the assessment, and the next would be the town lines question. Is that?
Just for backup, so as I said, I couldn't hear any part of her presentation, so I didn't hear what she said. So would you mind recapping? I'm not sure
Sure.
if the people in the audience were able to hear, so just that would give people a better idea of what was said, and that way I would also know.
Sure. And just for Christine, so there's been some discussion here. Part of what I'm going to do is repeat what you said at the beginning, because we were also having a downpour here, which was bouncing off of the roof and making it hard to hear. So I'm going to repeat what you said at the beginning, and if I make a mistake, please correct me. So I had asked a question about the possibility of making a change in the spring, because Christine had mentioned Springtown meetings, and I had shared that the information I found on the DESI website saying that changes that were going to go into effect for the following fiscal year had to be approved by the board by December. And she clarified that that really is only in the case where you're adding grades or you're adding a town, because what happens is DESI needs time in that case to figure out the Chapter 70 ramifications. But in the case that you're making changes that don't involve adding grades or adding another member town, that you could make a change in the spring for the following year, correct?
For me?
Yes.
Yeah, I missed a lot of what you were saying, actually. Sorry.
Basically, I was saying if it's not adding a new grade or a new member town, then the December 31st board vote doesn't apply. I'm not sure which microphone is picking this up. Can you hear me now?
Oh, okay. Now I can. Yeah.
Okay. What I had said was that you had said if we were not making changes that added a new member town or a new grade, that the December 31st board deadline doesn't apply because there aren't really the same kind of Chapter 70 ramifications.
Right. Right. Yeah, and I did say just be cautious about the budget.
Can you clarify what you mean, be cautious about the budget?
Again, to the extent you're changing the assessment provisions, you know, let's say you're using students as a measure of assessing your towns, and you want to change the 5-year rolling averages or something. That would make an impact on how the assessments are created. So again, you want to be cautious about saying, I'm going to the Springtown meeting, going to ask them to approve an agreement based now on a change in the assessment method using 5-year rolling averages. We prepared a budget on the basis of 5-year rolling averages. If they vote down the amendment, the budget is automatically voted down. So now you're at Springtown meeting and you just had your budget voted down. You know, maybe not because they disapproved the concept of the overall budget, but because they didn't like something else in the regional agreement language, that you were proposing.
So I think I'll use this as an opportunity to share what was being discussed here and see if you would opine on that, which is, we were really, the members were talking about the possibility of doing revision in 2 chunks, because there is a fall meeting and there is a spring meeting, and maybe taking care of some pieces in the fall that would, like budget, for example, and then maybe some fine tuning in the spring. Have you ever seen it done that way? Do you have any opinion about whether that would be advisable or not?
Well, I guess again, I'd be cautious in this respect. There are certain things that we would need to ensure that met the letter of the law and the regulation before we could make a positive recommendation and the commissioner approved it. So, the concept of, let's say, doing a few things in the spring or the fall, and then a few other things in the spring. Depending on what it is that you might be holding back, the commissioner may not be able to approve the agreement unless all of it is fixed. Let's just say it's all local things, it's not nothing necessarily that it's a matter of not meeting the law, that you wanted to, change your amendment process, or, include some language that didn't have strict requirements in law. In that instance, we probably could.
Thank you. Other questions?
Is there a list of the components that should be included in the new agreement, aside from just language surrounding how we operate, or, how we operate?
Okay, this question is from Michelle Boudreau. The question is there a list of the components that should be required in a revised agreement?
Yes, and I will send you that. I should have sent you that in advance of this meeting, my apologies. But we do have it on our website as well. There's what's called a checklist for regional school district agreements, and it does outline, the requirements that are in the law, provide some other tips as well, some of the things I mentioned to you earlier that, if you're adding this, you might also want to think of something else, but it makes an attempt, certainly, to distinguish what are the legal requirements and what are some other helpful tips that we generally advise people. So, but it's on our website, but I can certainly send you that as well. So you'll have some better information on that. Our website, by the way, is the school finance website, and under that section, there is a subsection called regional school districts, and on that there are several advisories. There's the listing, there's this checklist, there's a number of different things that might be useful, but the checklist in particular I think would be useful.
Thank you. Any other questions? So this is, again, a question about approval timeline. Let's say we get something approved by the towns and approved by the committee, and then, we've been working with you all the way through so that it has the components that you need. How long does it take for the commissioner to sign off?
That usually doesn't take long at all. The hard part is, as I mentioned before, it's sort of going back and forth between you and your committee and knowing your town and towns and what language, would they be happy with, or what provisions in terms of meeting one person, one vote, or budget provisions, or whatever other, the school's provision. How do you come up with language that, you feel comfortable would get passed in your towns? And then vetting it with us, and sometimes that takes multiple iterations, to kind of go back and forth. So that's the time-consuming part. The process that we use is it goes back and forth, let's say between my office and you and your committee, going back and forth potentially on language, maybe involving our legal office as needed if something comes up. And we would ultimately give you the go-ahead to say, all right, if this is the language, we've all agreed on this language now, you can present this for your final school committee vote, and you can present this to town meeting vote. You go to the school committee, you go to the town meeting, hopefully everything passes. You then submit it back to us, and that's when the commissioner approves it. He approves it after your member test. So by that time, we've already vetted it back and forth. The legal offices that involved your towns have actually approved it. You submit it for final approval by the commissioner. He'll sign it, sign a cover letter as well, saying this is not been approved. That part doesn't take too long. It's the back and forth. Sometimes, and again, as I indicated earlier, it just depends how controversial something might be at the local level in terms of how you want to draft the language.
John, let's say we dot our i's, cross our t's, everything's approved, we send it off to the state. How long does it take for the commissioner to approve it once it's all good? We talking a day, a week, a month?
Okay, so this is a request just to get a little bit more refinement on how quickly the commissioner's signature comes when we've passed agreed upon language in our communities.
Yeah, 2 days or so. I mean, that part of it is not, it depends whether he's out of town or, some places, but even then, it's not generally an issue at all.
So how I see this, right, is if I'm correct, we know some language and we're working on some stuff right now, right? They're going to give us some language that needs to be used. We're going to put it together. We're going to see how it goes, how it looks. Oh, this language is good, sensitive, transparent. Send it back to them. Oh, no, they give us a tweak. It comes back, goes back until we all agree on it. Once we all agree on it, then we would send it to the school committee for approval, right? And then after that, it would go to the member towns for approval. And then after that, it would go to the commissioner to get final sign-off. Is that's how I think the process that she just stated is that, are we all in agreement? Tell me what.
Yeah, I think there's going to be many iterations of that.
Yeah, that's what I said.
It's going to be is just, the ones.
Oh, I think when we go to the school committee, it's probably going to come back to us and school committee and back to us a little bit.
Member towns, I think, as well.
Yeah. Well, no, that's the member towns to vote. We have member town representatives here.
Right,
But I think there'll be some communication
Yeah.
between the represent.
Oh, of course.
representation
That's
and
part of
the
us.
Finance committee and just
Yeah.
having discussions back and forth, so I think that there will be some communication and collaboration.
Yeah, that's
throughout
exactly
this
what
process.
I'm sorry, if I didn't make it clear, that's exactly when we're going back and forth, it's this committee, which are both member towns and two members from both member communities of the school committee. And then once we have this refined, we go to the school committee, and the school committee might want some changes and stuff that we have to go and take back and do. And then once the school committee approves, then it goes to vote at the member towns. So if during this whole process, I would hope that the member towns would be saying any issues that they would have, right? Yeah, okay. We don't have to specifically send it to the town hall and say they approve.
No, I mean, the member towns are voting, they're
They're
voting
here,
at
yeah.
the town meeting. so
Right,
That's where we get.
okay.
Is there anything else for Christine? So, okay, let me thank you, Christine. This has been very helpful. I guess I do have one last question, which is, I heard you say that you're retired and you're helping out. Do you anticipate being there through this process if we're thinking about it this year, or?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. very
But
good.
I will say, I'm part-time, so I will emphasize the fact that Michelle Griffin, who could not be with us tonight because she's ill actually, but she is full-time, so sometimes it's easier to reach her, just because I'm a part-timer. But either one of us, will be perfectly fine. We both work on things together and work cooperatively, so either one of us you can contact at any time. But I will do this. I'll send you a copy of the checklist. I will take a look at the language of the regional agreement and provide you with some comments, in terms of things that you might want to look at and what might be legal things you might need to look at versus, what might be some other things that might be useful to look at. And I can also provide you, we have sort of a spreadsheet on the calculation of one person, one vote. And sometimes you can kind of play around with it and put, different numbers in to see how those might work. But again, I just want to emphasize, it's dependent on what method you use, what the population numbers, you're using. And I use ones that I got off the web. You may have different numbers that you use that might make some difference. And also, obviously, what method, how many members of the school committee you want to have. And the state doesn't regulate that only, so if you want 7's perfect, as far as we're concerned. You don't have to change that always. But anyway, I'll send you some information, and, hopefully that'll give you a little start, and once you get that, I'll be happy to, talk again, and hopefully my Zoom process here will work a little smoother.
All right, thanks very much.
Okay,
Appreciate it.
thank you. Good luck. Thanks.
Thank you.
Okay, so the other documents I brought to the meeting tonight are a draft communication and a draft survey. So just looking to see if you have any editorial feedback on the communication first.
Yeah, the thing I would add is maybe somewhere on this communication, it should have the makeup of this committee and who they are. So if people feel more comfortable reaching out to us directly, or if they have questions, they know they can reach us.
Anything else?
Will there be other opportunities aside from these 4 dates, just because they're all at the same time? So I
You
wonder.
mean over the summer?
Yeah, over the summer, will you have anything either in the morning or
I-
early evening?
I could adjust the times of the dates that, the dates were a little bit tricky to find. We went with 1 to 2 based on some feedback from the operators on when they have the most people there, but I'm not limited on time on those days, so I could make one of those a morning and one of those an afternoon.
Yeah, if we do, yeah, if you want to
Do a
the
virtual session too.
1 to 2, and then maybe do something in the evening as well. I mean, we should. I mean, I won't be able to attend necessarily during the day, but I would definitely be able to attend in the evening.
So how about if we make a couple of these morning, we'll leave a couple in the afternoon, and then we add a virtual session?
I would add a couple of virtual sessions. Maybe virtual around, somewhere around July 31st, and then August 15th. I'm just roughly in that area there. And do we want to start with a virtual session sometime week of the 10th, maybe?
Week of the 10th is a tough week.
Of July. Oh, okay. All right. I think a lot of people will be out of town then too, so. Okay.
But I could do, instead of July 31st and August 15th, I could try to get a virtual one towards the beginning.
No, I think that's good. So people are right now just enjoying being, summer's here and there's lots of going on, lots of vacations, 4th of July, stuff like that, people taking time off. So if we have, towards the end of July and the middle of August, virtual sessions, doesn't matter where people are, they can just log in. I think that would be helpful, along with these other dates.
Okay.
And were we thinking of doing like on the 18th, a morning session and then an evening session? Is that what you're talking about? Or make one of them would be morning and one of them would be evening?
One would be morning, one would be evening.
Okay.
And is your expectation that we're all there as well?
I think it would be great if people could be there. I mean, these are dates that work for me. I don't presume that they're going to work for everybody.
I'd have to take off for work. I mean, I'd have to take time off in order to be at any time, Monday through Friday. 3:30, 4 o'clock would be the earliest I could attend.
Maybe you could come to the virtual ones.
Yeah, and if you do ones in the evening, I can do that too.
That's what I was thinking for the virtual. I think I heard you say that it would be good to have some virtual PM sessions.
Mm-hmm. Oh, so these, oh, so you're saying you're gonna do one in the morning and then one at the 1 to 2 range?
Correct.
Oh, okay.
So you get some morning people, some afternoon people, and some evening people virtually.
Okay. Would we, everything would be virtual, or would we have an opportunity that people could come here, neutral ground, both towns?
I think if we're doing virtual, technically it'll be easier if it's just virtual.
Okay.
But as I think we heard earlier tonight, we have a little bit more time than I thought at the last meeting. So
No, we don't really, because we have to have everything approved by the fall town meetings, which is October, November range.
Well, if we do that, so that's our timeline. That's not something the state is imposing. I thought that we needed to have everything done in order to get it to the commissioner for December, but since we're not adding grades or another town, we can have more time if we need it.
Mm-hmm.
Which means there'll be open houses in the fall, there'll be other sessions where people come in that we can do some tabling, we can have the availability to talk about this.
Great. If we could get a schedule of that prepared, like sooner than later, so people can say, okay, 18th here, 19th here, 31st, 8th, 10th, 15th, I'm just saying roughly, right? And then when the school starts, September, we're gonna have one a week, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, one in the evening, whatever, just sessions, open houses. It really cuts down. So right now we basically have July, August, September before we have to have all of our work done to get it to the town so it can be for town meeting in October, November.
I could add open houses and other events I can foresee coming up to this communication.
Okay. Terry, I was going to ask, when's the fall town meeting, do you know?
I don't know the date exactly yet. I
Okay.
don't think we've set it.
Okay.
Are you going to reach out to the reminder and the times and, I mean, the more information you can put in there, everyone gets it delivered, everyone reads it, at least they, breeze over it anyway. If they see something that strikes a nerve, they're going to read the article. If you could put things down and especially, tell them come earlier than later to these sessions so we can get the information we need and work with it, and also direct them to the survey online, if it's going to be online, that kind of thing. I think you'll get a lot of feedback right away from most people once they learn, what's going on. I think they're very in tune to the education in town, and the people that are going to participate will do it sooner than later. That's been my experience anyway.
Agreed.
So is the point of the survey to eliminate some of the options that we currently have?
I think it's twofold. Part of it is to educate about the some of the issues in the district, as well as some of the limitations of the current agreement, and to get some feedback on what options would be more or less likely to get public support. So I guess that's a choice I made and would like some feedback. And I didn't just put the items from the memo into the survey, but I asked sort of more of the general questions around, regionalizing 6 through 12 or the whole thing, the idea of adding students to the high school to address the middle school and what people would think about that as an open response instead of just yes, no, because I think that is something that people want to give some qualitative responses to. And then also the idea around whether we want to keep the grade band schools, which have the equity concern folks have brought up, or whether we want to sort of expand the grade level served by schools, which may introduce an equity concern, but has the benefit of reducing the number of transitions kids have. So I think from this, that can guide us to what we would be favoring as we move forward. But I chose not to just say, here are 7 options without a lot of context. What do you think is the best? So one thing I'm looking for is feedback on that general approach. Do you think that's right, or should I just put the options out there and have people vote? And then the structure of this.
Yeah, I like, question number 1, number 2 is great. I wouldn't have 3 and 4. I don't think it necessarily matters what school you plan to attend or where your children attend. I mean, they're all schools, right? But you could ask number 6, which of the following describes your impression of the schools that your children attends or where you work.
So let me just argue in
Wait,
favor.
is it because we don't know if there's overcrowding, or you just want to get their impression if they think that there's overcrowding?
Right, so I think that someone who is coming into the high school, we can presume most of them would have had an experience of the middle school. If they haven't, if they're only starting out at Mile Tree, they might not know as much about what's happening there. That's why I felt it was important to get that information. And then, of course, if it's employees, you know the school where you work best, and so, I think people reporting about their own place of work, to me, means a little bit more than people reporting about other people's places of work, if you know what I mean?
I'm just saying, whenever you do a survey, I worked in marketing, and we why is this question here? I mean, okay, where do you reside? Okay, we want to know how, okay, people who answered this way were from Hamden, people who answered that way from Wilbraham, that's important. Relationships with the district as well. But honestly, is it a question? I mean, isn't it pretty much agreed across the board that there's overcrowding at some schools and not overcrowding at other schools? Is that still a question, is what I'm asking? We don't know if it's overcrowding. Why are we asking question number 6?
I don't think every parent is aware of every other school.
Right.
So, I mean, that's why I think it's relevant, the doctor's questions are relevant to, show what that person's experience is. I had no idea at all about TWD. Green Meadows, until I actually went and toured it. So I could not give any kind of feedback one way or the other on that school. And someone from Hamden may not have any feedback on the Wilbraham Middle School status.
Yeah, but I was asking this question with someone who doesn't know. We already know the answer to this question, is what I'm saying.
We know the answer.
Right, so we should be...
So by knowing how they feel, it'll give us an idea of...
Oh, so if they don't think there's overcrowding...
We need to educate them and show them, the school is rated for X number of students and there are this many in it. That could be a reason why something fails, because people just aren't aware.
Right. I would be more leaning towards, right before we send this out, right, have we gone and figured out the cost? Are any of the 4 that we seem to have been, roughly settling on, are any of those cost prohibitive? Like, for example, have we looked at, say, in order to, I think one option is we have, we move, grade 1 through 5 to Wilbraham Middle School. What would the cost of doing that be? What would the cost of putting 6 and 7 in TWB? That kind of thing. Is there anything that's cost prohibitive? Like,
I don't know what's cost prohibitive because I don't know what the appetite is. I do know that's the most expensive one. I think in our assumptions, we've felt that construction would probably be cost prohibitive, so we sort of eliminated all the ones that would be, doing new construction to schools. But one of the things we're going to be doing over the summer is trying to figure out the costs of the different ones. I think the other ones are comparable. I think the cost of 1 through 5 at the middle school is probably going to be your most expensive. At least initially, startup costs.
Right.
There'll probably be some savings in transportation over the long term.
so it seems to me the first question that the first question I would like, me personally, right, that I would like to get from the community is, what do you think about neighborhood schools versus the grade inclusive school? You know, getting that feedback, I think, is really important. Because if we have a vast majority says neighborhood schools, well, then that gives weight towards certain of these options and not certain of others. If it's 50-50, all right, that doesn't, you know, we still have to figure that one out. But I think, you know, like neighborhood schools, here's the two possibilities of what it would look like, right? And what it means is, you know, depending on how the lines change, your child could be at the same school from pre-K to 5. Or I'm sorry, just K to 5, right? You haven't changed these again? Isn't 7, 8, 9, and 10?
But
Oh, I'm sorry.
10 is that question, isn't it?
It is. I mean, it doesn't, I mean, I could modify it to say neighborhood or grade band. I could move it up in the survey.
I think it's really important to provide context, because if we're just saying, you know, what's your opinion? Do you want grade band
Right.
schools or neighborhood schools? Not everybody knows what that is.
Right.
And they also they don't understand the impact of each of those decisions.
Exactly.
That's one of our purposes here,
Mhm.
is to make sure that we are, you know, sharing the information with the community so they can make an informed decision. But I guess my ask would be that you're providing context, whether you have like a, you know, a letter that's going along with this so they understand, you know, what we're looking for, and just giving them some of the information that we've noticed or that we've seen, and, you know, how we came up with this. Looking at overcrowding, because again, I think a lot of people don't know about the overcrowding. I think that there are students whose there are parents who have students at Wilbraham Middle School that do not know that it's overcrowded.
Right.
So I think it's just, everybody's different. Everybody has a different level of understanding of what is actually going on, but I think it's important that you share the information that we've, you know, gathered and uncovered, so before answering.
And think about it like a new family moving into town. They may not even know
Right.
all these different schools exist. So if you do a introduction and say, you know, these are the schools, this is what they're rated for, this is what they have in each grade. Something simple, just the facts. But think about your terms in layman terms, in parent terms. The parents don't know all your abbreviations, they don't know your acronyms, they don't know your terms. You have to think, you know, in that context.
Right, so say like, I'm just throwing this out there, like a question would be, Green Meadows School has X amount of students, capacity is Y, so therefore, structurally, we could add a lot more kids to that school, or
Well,
it's
that's
not as
common sense,
overcrowded, or something like that, right?
Yeah, just give
But then we would ask, like,
Just
were you aware of this? Did you understand this? Was this to your understanding? That, or maybe a grade like, you know, K, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, something like, I want it to be more of like giving information as well as asking for information. You know, not trying to lead it, but just trying to, you know, were you aware of this? Were you aware of, like, the fact that, what's our biggest, so Stony Hill, right, is probably one that is significantly lacking in room. You know, if we were to say, were you aware of this type of thing, as a way of educating, but as well as finding out what, like, people are like, no, we had no idea that Stony Hill was so overcrowded, then we know that we really need to get more education about Stony Hill out there. Or if they were saying like, no, we did not know this about Green Meadows, okay, we really need to get that information about Green Meadows out there. Just trying to be a little more like a dartboard, like, you know, let's get it right on, rather than just throwing out a question that could have such a broad, you know, interpretation. What does overcrowding mean? You know, that kind of, you know, give them the definitions, give them the information, and then see what if they knew that. No, and then when we went on to number 10, instead of it just being, you know, this or that, but to actually say, we have two different options. We have this option, and we have this option. And these have two, and these have two, you know, basically what we whittled it down to. which do you lean towards? Neighborhood schools or whatever? For example, if we went, let's say if we went with option A, it would cost the towns, $500,000 in renovations. But if we went option B, it wouldn't cost us, it would cost us $100,000 in renovations. Does that change your preference? Does that matter to you? That kind of thing, right? But we really need to get an idea of costs. And also, have we been also getting the wheels in motion? I know we had graduation, it's end of school today, I get it. But are the wheels in motion at the high school to come up with a plan on how we would work the 8th graders into this school and how that would look like?
I would say the wheels are in motion.
Excellent.
There's a lot that needs to be figured out, but yeah.
Okay. Do you understand, let's have this survey do something. We want it to educate as well as we want to see what the preferences to the community is. And rather than just asking for preferences, it's better to give some education and then say, based on that information, what do you feel? Do you see?
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
There's no confusion.
Okay.
I just think some of the questions, for instance, number 8, how should the agreement be revised? Like that question, I don't know that that's, I think based on how the survey is constructed, I think that.
We know how it has to be revised.
Right, like how are people supposed to know? And then we're basically leading them, but it's still, they don't understand the impact and what we're actually looking for. So I think, people want to know how this is going to impact them. So, perhaps residents aren't going to be concerned if their student is never going to be in, a certain building again. But I think it's important.
Yeah.
I mean, so we just have to make sure that we're providing the information and making sure that, and also the way that we order the question is really important.
Mm-hmm.
And again, providing the context is really important.
Yeah. This is a great first draft. I mean, you got questions out there, you got conversation happening here, and it's amazing. And I'll be able to help you more. I mean, I'm taking the 5th of July week off. So I will have, time where I can, you're going to be on vacation, you can just give me work, Sean, do this, and then whatever, all right? Because after that, it's going to be very busy at work for the next 2 weeks.
I appreciate the committee's feedback. I think I have some sense of direction on both of these. In terms of context, I think the context should go to the letter because this is the cover letter that I see going out with this because it'll be linked right in it as we send it out to our system. And I think I have a sense of what you want me to do with the survey. What I would propose so that we can continue to work without having to schedule a meeting or violating any open meeting laws is I could just continue to work on some drafts, share them with everyone, get some more feedback. And then when I feel like I have enough thumbs pointing up, I'll just send it out.
Sounds great.
John, can I just add one thing? Have you thought about doing a student vectored survey that really targets the students and get their ideas and thoughts on things and how they actually feel?
Well, I thought I had anticipated sending this survey out to the students as well, which is why it's one of the options. Are you thinking about a different survey?
I'm just thinking something that really is in tune with them.
More experiential.
That's who I have talked with most is alumni, from the last 5 years or so of Minnetonka, and they have some pretty strong feelings. And I'm just wondering how you're going to get to those people with this survey that's going to go, I don't know how they're going to get involved in it, and I think that they should. So I'm not sure how you do that.
Oh, so you're saying alumni in particular, not present students?
Obviously, because I have kids who have recently graduated from the district, but, it could be someone who just graduated from the middle school, and now they're progressing into 9th grade, or someone that graduated from out of Stony Hill, and now they're going on to the next.
Yeah, I think all present students the intent was to get this to them, correct?
Just something that's their lingo. I mean, they're not going to want to participate in this. Gear it towards the kids and just try to get their feedback. I'd be curious to see how they feel about their school. I don't know how you're going to do it since it's, break. But, I'm just, you know, they're the ones who sit in these rooms and go home and say yay or nay to their parents. So, their parents are playing off what they get from their kids, for feedback. So I think it's important to get the kids' perspective on this. The
If
kids are
that's
happy-
something else that we do in, you know, first day of school or something like that, the kids get this link, you know, that could also be a way of capturing at least the present students. So I like Shakespeare, right? I like Shakespeare because he says the same thing like 4 different ways, incompletely, like, you know, if you know the story of how the people, you have the groundlings and you have the different levels, right? And one thing is meant for these people, one thing is meant for those, you know, it's just speaking to people on their terms. So when you're doing something like this, whatever you have included in this letter, you know, you want to, you know, do a little Shakespeare on it so that it's said in a different way here as well to reinforce it. Because some people love to read letters, some people love to read the information on the survey, some people both. People have different leanings, so if someone just sees, I'll just do the survey, I'm not going to read this, and they just go to the survey, we want to make sure that this information is here and that this information is here.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm asking you, John, to be Shakespeare.
It's a tall order, but I'll do my best.
And let's just work a timeline. Okay, unless you got more conversation on this?
I do.
Okay.
And this is meant for community members as well?
No,
Or
this is
strictly
the
for
school
parents?
community. The last meeting we talked about getting something out to the school community before we went out to the whole community.
And we will also be surveying the community, the greater community, not this, I understand it won't be this exact survey, but it's a plan to also survey, or that, would they just be part of any of the forums or the, you know, kind of?
We haven't specifically discussed strategies for the whole community around survey. Certainly, there are ways of getting that out there to everybody, but I don't know if that's the best method, or if the forums are the best method, or if we want to have a multi-tiered strategy. Right now, I've just been focused on trying to keep the conversation going among the school community.
So with that, since we have an aggressive, a lot of work to do, an aggressive timeline still, we have to think about our next meeting date.
Michelle, before you jump into that, could I just, in order to get to that question, so we have 10 days left in June, right, which we're going to be working on getting the survey and the letter fine-tuned, correct? And then July and August, we're going to be working on the survey and having those initial meetings, virtual and in person, morning and afternoon, and evening for virtual, right? It seems to me that we would have to have gone back and forth and present. How much time do you have to give something to the town, a warrant, before it can appear on the town? I know the finance one is 45 days.
I don't know the time frame. I don't want to say it wrong. Find out, but
Yeah, if it's 45 days, the same as the finance one, then that really limits us. So we would need to, in September, give the school committee the language and go back and forth with them to see what changes they want, right? And then September, beginning of October, depends when the town meetings are, we would have to give them enough notice, if it's at 45 days, like it is for the budget. It just really hampers our time. We have a lot that we have to do, I believe.
That's why we plan on meeting.
our next
Well,
meeting.
I know, but I just wanted to lay it out,
But
like,
I think it would be helpful because that way, I believe that Hamden has their town meeting date. I'm not sure if Wilbraham, but then they can get the dates, we can have a little bit more.
do you know when the date is for Hamden?
No, I don't.
Oh.
I bet Don knows. I believe it's late October, if I'm not mistaken, the end of October. But again, I'm not
Okay.
sure, but again, I think we could
Yep.
put some more concrete information so we can have, rather than, spitballing, I guess. We could just,
Sure.
we could work on, like, these are the dates, this is what we're working towards. And then how often do we have to meet? Are we bringing, are we going to bring the finance committee in and advisory? Are we going to have some of these conversations so we can kind of begin to iron out some of these details as we work through the timeline? I think that would be really helpful.
Right. So I'm just saying that if we're focusing on really being done here as a committee and presenting to school committee in the beginning of September, ironing out any questions school committee has, if any, right? Then we can send it to the towns and then answer questions and keep on doing what we're doing. But it would seem that we would need to be in place in September. So with that, we do have the rest of June, July, and August. So I would say if we could meet maybe next Tuesday. We still have to finalize the letter and the survey.
So I guess what I'm looking for from everybody are there dates in the next, week to 10 days that you are unavailable? Are there days, are you going away? Just so we have an idea again for the larger, planning period. You're off, but you're around, right?
Yeah, I'm off, but I'm around. It's my son's birthday on the 5th of July, so I take that week off, and the 4th of July.
And Terry, dates, and we'll get the dates from John, but just thinking that we will have to have some sort of, I guess I would imagine, a rigorous meeting schedule.
Yeah.
However, we plan to move forward with that, but just trying to get some dates on the table and seeing when people are available, when you're not available. Also, John. 27th. Okay. So I think, and we'll just confirm with John, but we can tentatively.
Next Tuesday, you're talking about?
Yeah.
I'm not available. next
Okay.
Tuesday.
What about, would you be able remotely or?
No, I'll be tied up next Tuesday.
Okay.
So I think it's important that all of our members are there, and we're not able to do it on Monday either.
I think a lot of the drafts that we're talking about could be, you could email back, we don't need to be in person. Those are things you could email us and we could give input on email, on questions and surveys and things like that. I mean, I'm comfortable with that.
So we would have to send stuff to John. John would have to corral them, and then,
Yeah, I will label, and just remind everyone to respond to me only.
yeah,
I think Shakespeare will do a great job, so
There you
there
go.
shouldn't be too many edits.
the Bard.
But even just moving forward with some of the additional, timelines. So,
I personally have a very busy summer. I'm traveling quite a bit this summer, so, well, not all of it's good, so. But yes.
all right, so we'll leave it. We'll maybe via email, we'll see if we can coordinate some dates that will work for everybody. And if people are available via Zoom, we'll do our best. But I think we'll leave the next meeting date to be determined. And we'll figure
Okay.
out, coordinate, again, get it on the calendar. But I think Don, it's important that
Of course.
Don weighs in on when he's available.
Are you available anytime of the week of the 25th, 26th, 27th through the 1st, next week?
Of June.
Yeah. You said you couldn't do the 27th or Monday the 26th. I think we have a school
Well,
committee.
Monday we have selectmen meetings, so.
Great,
that's-
yeah,
That's
yeah.
out.
Yeah. Oh, we have a school committee meeting on Monday too.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I have to confirm my schedule, so I'll put it out to be an email.
I just say, so is it a potential availability in that week or not, Terry?
The only day I have free is the 29th, which is a Thursday,
Okay.
in the evening.
I'm saying that, so that's why, so now you know that the only time that we could meet next week would be the 29th. And if that works for you and works for Don, works for me, we can make it happen.
Yeah. Okay, so we'll do the email.
Awesome.
Confirm and see.
Motion to adjourn?
Second?
Okay, roll call. Terry?
Aye.
Sean?
Aye.
Myself, aye. We're adjourned 7:01.